Hello, I'm talking with Tassos Stassopoulos, looking at themes in emerging markets. Now, many people assume that societies in emerging markets are now where the developed world was 1 or 2 generations ago, but they're catching up fast. So surely it's only a question of time before their wants and needs look much the same as the developed world does now.
Mike, actually, this is one of the biggest misconceptions about emerging markets, that modernization cannot happen without westernization, that they will follow the path that we're following. But actually, each country evolves differently based on its culture. And we see that people will follow very different paths as each of these countries will be developing. I remember when I was at university, there was this sociologist, Anthony Giddens, who talked about media imperialism. That was almost 30 years ago, that Western countries, to dominance of the media sector, for example, Hollywood, were influencing the way values were shifting in these emerging markets and therefore affecting the way countries were developing. But with the proliferation of content and social media, it allows people to find content that resonates more with them and their values. Whether this is going to come from Bollywood or a blogger or YouTube, as such, a country today in emerging markets is setting their own way they're developing and not moving like herds following what the Western world did. The concept of modernization being driven by westernization, it could only be true if there were only one type of media, and that was Western type of media. Now, can you think of a world that there is only one form of entertainment, and that is only Facebook?
That would be a truly horrible place, in my opinion, to be honest.
Why?
Well, it would just be people posting all about themselves, really, wouldn't it?
Well, we find that people who are active posters on Facebook in general tend to have competitive values and are seeking status. They want to be admired. Imagine you're on Facebook every day, though, and you're just browsing. And after 2 years of only watching all these people posting about their meals that they're about to eat, you sit down and you look at your meal and you think, this is so much better than anyone else's photos. Let me take a photo and I'll show them what real food is like. And from that day onwards, you're going to take a picture of every pint you're about to drink or every time your dog is being cute.
I don't think that's really me, to be honest.
That's probably because your values are not in the competitive set. You are a creative and curious person. Now you're sitting across from me and you're writing with this calligraphy fountain pen that probably costs no more than £5. And every time I meet you, you seem to be writing with another wacky original color in beautiful handwriting. The color for the day seems to be sunburn. And on last podcast, it was purple. And the one before, it was this bright green. Facebook is not attractive to you because it doesn't resonate with your values. And what would resonate with people who have individualistic and competitive values, which is what we generally have in the Western world. Now, over the past year, we have been doing research on a social media site coming out of China called TikTok. Users can post short videos of up to 15 seconds. Now, this is a Facebook challenger, and you might think Facebook challengers have come and gone. But bear with me and just think of it through a values framework. A year ago, we were in Mumbai and we met Chaya, a 30-year-old cleaner who was studying to be a nurse. She was creating 15-second videos and posting them on TikTok. She didn't fit the values of a typical status-seeking Facebook content provider that we normally meet. For Chaya, TikTok was a channel of expression. It gave her a voice she didn't know she had and allowed her to build confidence. And as such, she connected with TikTok through her values. She found it accepting and inclusive, as opposed to a culture of perfection fed on a diet of staged and curated content that she saw on more judgmental Facebook. Now, we heard comments like this about TikTok repeatedly, both in rural and urban areas. EMs are generally more inclusive and collective societies, as opposed to more competitive and individualistic cultures as the developed world. And TikTok reflects this. And this is one of the most powerful themes in EM today. They're having modernization without westernization.
Can you give me an example of a product that would resonate with emerging market values?
Now, I remember maybe it was a year and a half ago, a pension plan manager asked me, why do you even bother speaking to all these consumers? Don't you know they will all buy iPhones like we do? Now, in behavioral finance, this is called projection bias. It means people tend to exaggerate the degree to which future taste will resemble their current taste. I remember how shocked I was in November 2014 when Mr. Wang, an HR manager in China, argued with me that his Xiaomi phone was better than my iPhone because it had better hardware and was cheaper. My first reaction was to think that he was only saying that because he couldn't afford an iPhone. But I was wrong. I didn't bother to understand his values. 3 years ago, with values more ingrained in my psyche, I met the pragmatic, down-to-earth 19-year-old in India. He thought his Oppo phone was better than an iPhone. While Apple had managed to tap into some very appealing values for a lot of people, those who value prudence, or to put it differently, value, might struggle to see where their values coincide. Deepak values prudence. He plans and has backup plans for everything. Even when he had the money, he preferred to buy a phone that was better money for value than an iPhone. Without values, I would have struggled to understand that. And when you're looking at investing, what you have to do is understand the consumer's values and find the products that resonate with those values.
In the past, we've talked about statistics not being able to give you the full picture in emerging markets. But with machine learning and better data, surely it's only a matter of time before the machines are going to take over the investment process.
Well, it's true. In the investment world, machines are extremely efficient at correlating behavior and looking for patterns. They can put trades in milliseconds from statistics being announced, or they can read quarterly results to see if there is more positive tone words used than negative. So machines will look at some amazing relationships that you had never even thought of or had even time to look at. But it is just telling you what is happening by looking at correlated events. To predict what will happen next, you need to understand why something is happening. High tech alone is as useful as simply marrying somebody because Tinder said that your profiles are a perfect match. I believe in the next decade, we will stop romanticizing about the power of AI and machines and realize that neural network algorithms depend on recognizing patterns, which is well suited only in certain areas. I think that in the next decade, success is going to come from how we transition ourselves away from functions that are better suited to technology and allows us to focus on addressing better our clients' needs.
So you talk there about the why. How do we go about finding out the why? What's the process that you use?
Well, traditional investment processes are analytical processes. They're effective when there is a clear-cut solution, such as valuing a company. If you're searching for the why, analytical processes will not work because you're looking for solutions in rapidly changing places like EMs, where the problems themselves are fuzzy. For that, you need a different process, which you call an insightful process. But the problem of generating insights is that it's not like analysis that you know when they will come. For most people, they come out of the blue. Can you think of a case where you came up with an insight, which was an aha moment? What were you doing? How did it happen?
I was down the pub chatting with my friend about his mother, who sadly has dementia. I work in radio, and suddenly I had this moment out of the blue that I realised that even though people's memories might be terrible, they can still sing the lyrics to the songs that they remember from when they were younger. And out of that, the Reminiscence Radio show was born that I do once a month.
So you see, when I ask people about moments of insight, I hear comments like this, that I was in the pub, I went for a run, I was having a shower.
Well, that's actually where I came up with the idea to put the music in chronological order. And that's turned out to be the USP of the Reminiscence Radio show, is that idea in the shower, not just playing the music they know, but in the order the record was released in.
Exactly. Now, when you're going to try and do the research that we do in EMs, I cannot ask the analyst team to spend their day in the shower looking for insights. So what we do, we have a specific design process that we develop with ethnographers. We call it the 4I process, where we will start with information, we will draw inferences, which is answering the why, and then we will try to have the aha moment, the moment of insight, and then we figure how we can have impact on the portfolio. So to give you an example, We met a woman in Aurangabad in India who said she was into healthy eating. We gave her $10 and went to a convenience store to see what she would buy. She bought some savory snacks, a jar of Nescafe, and a Cadbury's chocolate bar. Nothing healthy. We came back and looked at her cupboards, and these items were not in her cupboards, and it was all ingredients healthy food. This is purely information. We don't put any view of ours to affect it. We have to answer, why did she behave in this way? That's the inference. And the answer we came up with was, could she be buying what she would buy if she had incremental income? So we went and looked at the cupboards and of one socioeconomic group ahead of her, and these items were there. So we concluded that actually, by looking at one socioeconomic group ahead of you, you can predict what people will consume next. So this is how you move through a more structured process to try to generate insights. So if you take this idea and think of how fridges evolve in emerging markets, when you buy your first fridge, it's an efficiency device. You store ingredients and leftover food. And this is what this woman was storing effectively in her fridge. When you become middle class, you start indulging yourself and your family. So the fridge will include things like chocolate, ice cream, cold beer, wine, butter. And when you become affluent, you focus on health. And at that stage, your fridge will have all the healthy items because the rich want to live as long as possible to enjoy their wealth. So what you see there is this immortality in the fridge through this diet, everything probiotic, low-fat items. When you take a step back, you can look at the various consumers. And basically what this consumer was doing when you gave her $10 extra, she was shifting her consumption into an indulgence pattern.
Your teams need to understand what's going on in people's minds, really, don't they? What sort of skills do you look for in your team to help them undertake that task?
Well, they have to pass what I call the spicy crab test. And the spicy crab test works as follows. You have somebody who thinks they can do this ethnographic research. They come to see you in your office and you say to them, would you like to get some lunch together? And you give them two choices. Would you like to go and get a nice sushi bento box at Nobu, a nice people viewing scene? Or would you like to come with me to this amazing Chinese place that sells spicy crab? It's amazing infusion of flavors of chilies and garlic. But it's not very hygienic. But don't worry, when they bring the plates, we're going to take this hot tea and we're going to wash the plates, and probably we will not get sick. But no guarantees, it will be an amazing lunch experience. And you see the individuals who want to go to Nobu, they're never going to make it on an ethnographic study. Now, on top of that, you need people who have the skills to listen, but not only to listen, they need to have the values of empathy and be able to step in other people's shoes. And on top of that, you need them also to have the financial skills, statistics, to be able to analyze securities. So to find the people to do this type of work and tick a lot of these boxes is very difficult. I can tell you that social anthropologists and ethnographers, psychologists would be amazing at doing the first part of the work, or going to meeting people and empathizing, but they wouldn't be able to do the second part. And financial people generally can do the analytical part, but are they really willing to go and spend their time traveling through villages and sleeping on consumers' floor when they can just go to a nice conference and eat sushi at Nobu?
You've worked with emerging markets for many years now. What personal misconceptions did you bring to the job, and what did you need to change about yourself?
When I started doing these ethnographic studies almost a decade ago, I believe that every country will evolve based on its own culture. Every culture is completely different, and therefore you have to go on the ground and study the culture, but there is no lessons you can draw. And actually, it's almost impossible to study the cultures because culture is lived, is not articulated. Now, to study culture, you need a framework. And for me, it was the creation of framework, which took almost 5 years, because ultimately, culture is a collection of the core values that each individual holds. Now, in my number-crunching days, I viewed values as something completely irrelevant, but I was wrong. Values reflect what is important to us in life. They're the personal guiding principles of life goals. They underpin our beliefs, biases, and behaviors. And ultimately, how values shift in these emerging markets is what will determine what the future will look like for these markets. So it's actually one of the most important things to study in emerging markets, the shift of values to help you anticipate the changing consumption patterns and in trends.
How do you see the future growth rate of emerging markets in light of things like more and more automation? Haven't we now missed the boat for the opportunities that emerging markets once held?
Mike, this is the most common question I get asked about emerging markets. So I'm going to throw a question back at you, which is a parallel, but let's take it back 250 years and let's go to 1760s in the United Kingdom. And I ask you the question of the weaving machine has just been invented. We're going to have more and more automation. Has the opportunity bypassed the United Kingdom? So how does that sound as an argument to you?
It doesn't really work, does it?
And that's the point. I mean, technophobia has been around since jobs have been around. A popular myth of the origin of the word saboteur is that poor workers in France during the Industrial Revolution, wearing wooden clocks known as sabots, used to throw them in the weaving machines to disrupt production because they were fearful of their jobs. And this fear of jobs and machine, it's been around forever. But actually, what I believe is that the opportunity for emerging markets with technology has never been bigger, and it's actually much bigger than we ever had in the developed world. And what is allowing them to do is changes that has taken us generation and decades for them to go through it at a much faster pace and do it in years. And I think they're looking for setting their own trends and even trends for us to follow. And the runway that these emerging markets have is still huge.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your continued insights, not just in the trends in emerging markets, but how you actually go about uncovering them.
Thank you, Mike.